Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. We've made it through another week. I'm excited to start the weekend and get ready for another fantastic week next week of who knows what. It's always exciting in this world. Big hello to everyone tuning in here on Behance or on Twitter. If you are on Twitter and do want to chat along, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live so I can see all of your fantastic faces. We've got Tatiana and Miroslav and Cody and Misayu and Aubrey, Christine, Wade, Anita, Steve, Brett from Hamilton, Ontario, Golden Rose, Yo2, Julia. Great to see everyone. Thank you, Cody, for linking all that information. Marsha, who I believe is from Canada as well. A few weeks ago, we had like 9,000 Canadians in the chat. Slight exaggeration, but not too far off. I am going to make sure, just give me 1 second. I forgot to switch something over on my camera, so the resolution might be a little bit too low. And that should click in just a second. All right. Fancy Friday. I agree, Cody. Seth, great to see you. Alrighty, so another day, another masterclass. This is masterclass number 44. We've been at this for 44 weeks, and many of you in the chat have been along for this ride since the very beginning. So a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. Boop, there we go. And I'm on my Instagram page, instagram.com/Howard Pinsky. The reason I'm here, not just to show off the things that I do, although, maybe a little bit of a plug, possibly. But over the last few weeks, we've been building out this cryptocurrency experience focused on the desktop. And the last 2 weeks, I believe, we started with the wallet building experience, the onboarding flow, right? And today we're going to move on to the actual dashboard of this experience. So right here, what's playing is the wallet flow, the onboarding experience, and there is the dashboard that we're going to start building out today. If anyone has questions throughout this stream, definitely let me know in the chat. And if anyone's just joining on Twitter, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live. I don't believe Twitter, the new streaming platform that I'm using right now, I don't believe I can see comments on there. So definitely head on over to Behance. All right. So hopping into Adobe XD. Let's see. Apparently all Canada tunes in for Howard's Masterclass. I agree. How do you share an interactive prototype on Behance? So when you're sharing, I might be able to show this later, you can copy the embed code. Actually, if I go to share over here, right here's share mode. And once you publish this link, let me go ahead and publish this. Create link. It's going to go ahead and create this link. The entire prototype is going to go up into the lovely cloud, and it's a pretty big file, so this might take a little bit. But it's doing its thing, and basically once you share it, you'll be able to copy the embed code, and then on Behance you can paste the embed code, so someone can actually interact with that prototype, or you can send them a link to the prototype as well. So I'll let that do its thing. We'll come back to that. So this is what we've been working on over the last few weeks. Andre almost missed to join. You are just in time, my friend. So we've been working on this over the last few weeks, and last week we started to get a little bit creative with colors, and honestly, thinking about it and looking at it, the colors just aren't working, right? This happens a lot. As designers, we sit down, or it's like 2 a.m, we wake up and we're like, I should add colors to my design. And then you do it, and then you take a break, and then you look at it, and it's a pile of garbage. Right? It happens all the time. So I'm not digging the colors, and the colors are just, it causes problems when you want to start adding content, like even this logo, right? It's difficult to work with. So I figured we're going to pull back, and we're just going to keep it simple. And we're going to go with white cards against a fairly light background. We've got those subtle shadows that we talked about last week to help separate those cards from the background, and it looks better, right? I was also experimenting with this. If I do want to introduce a few additional colors to this design, maybe the background could be a static color and it doesn't change from card to card. Something I might continue to explore, but I think in the meantime, something like this is very simple, it's very clean, and I think it's going to work. And Cody nailed it, right? That's why it's always good to take breaks and come back with fresh eyes. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to sleep after working all day on a project, and I've woken up and it just wasn't working, right? Because as you're sitting here designing something, your mind is becoming accustomed to whatever it is you're designing, and it's essentially convincing itself that it's amazing. So walking away, even for 15 minutes, grabbing some water, which by the way, I just picked up this massive water bottle to keep myself hydrated. And I have actually noticed a difference in my health and just my energy on a day-to-day basis if I'm keeping up with that. It's a big bottle, it's heavy. So yeah, take breaks, walk away, get some water, get some fresh air, have a good time, right? All right, so again, we're not gonna go through this entire thing, but I do wanna show you that, you know, this is what it's looking like. Here's the wallet experience you can tap, and we have these fun animated indicators at the bottom, and it just goes through this process of onboarding. You can create a new wallet. This thing comes in, right? And you can go through. I'm not going to go through the whole cryptocurrency wallet thing right now. I talked about that, I think, in the first week, but you know, you have these 12 words that are part of your seed. Got it written down. It's going to scramble them up so that it really makes sure that you have them written down. You can go through, I think, here we go. I forget the order exactly. Coffee, donuts, wallpaper, right? And then bam, you've got your seed. And then when you press wrap up, we're going to be taken to our dashboard that we're going to start creating today. So let's dive in and have some fun. We'll just go down here and start creating this bad boy. I'm going to grab the Artboard tool, shortcut key A, and let's start with a 1920 by 1080 pixel artboard. And of course, you know, I am focusing on the desktop right now, but because we're designing at 1920 by 1080, a lot of what you design can definitely be used for the web as well, right? And, you know, responsive resize and things like that, a little bit of tweaking, you can also use it for mobile. So, very similar to what we did up here, we might want a background. And I'm gonna grab the good old rectangle tool, draw one out like that. And I'm gonna hop over to Finder or Explore on Windows. And I have a ton of different backgrounds that I've just been grabbing from Adobe stock and pop that in there. Of course, gradients, you can make your own gradients using the gradient picker in Adobe XD. I'm a little bit lazy, and if I come across a gradient that I really like, I'm gonna use it, right? We all do it. All right, now on top of this, we might want our main container for this particular dashboard. So with the rectangle one more time, I'm gonna draw one out, hop it in the center, at least for now. We're gonna be moving it in a minute. And then we're gonna round out the corners just a little bit. Let's go for around, let's say 32 pixels. We're sticking with that 8 pixel grid. Not completely necessary, but you can do it. Miroslav is asking, is there any way you can teach us the Adobe XD logo lines animation from Funded by Adobe? Oh, I think you're talking about the UI kit that's on Behance. I linked possibly last week or the week before. It might have been on a weekend I linked it. I haven't experimented with that. That wasn't something that I created, so I'm gonna have to dive in and really take a look at how that was created. Pretty cool stuff though. So if that's what you're talking about, yeah, I'll take a look at that and I'll see if I can replicate that. All right, so we have our container, and I'm thinking we might want to introduce a little bit of color with this. Now, because we are probably, do we need a border? Maybe we need a little bit of a border. We'll get to that in a moment. Because we are working on a dashboard and there's gonna be a lot of elements on top of it, we probably wanna stay away from bright, vibrant colors like this red, right? So we're gonna go in the blue range and we're gonna introduce a little bit of color, just a tiny bit of blue, right? This happy little blue, as Bob Ross would say. And of course, we're gonna be using assets, so we can always, you know, pop that in our assets like we're going to do right now. Boop. And we'll be able to change that later on. And Cornell says, can components remember clicked words? For example, if you select the words and go to the next, so not at the moment, you'd have to build that into the design. Something like that, which is, you know, logic and things like that, the team is looking into. Obviously, it's a very big project, but something they want to get to. So maybe at some point in the future. All right, so we have this, and we did add a little bit of a border. It's hard to see, so I'm going to bump it up by about 1 pixel. It's a very subtle border. It just helps add a little bit of an edge there. And the last thing I might want to add to this particular container is a shadow. I'm big on shadows, but very subtle shadows that help the process, right? Shadow's not necessary in this case, but many applications, they do have the shadow based on the OS that's running it, right? So I'm going to bump it down on the Y axis quite a bit. I'm going to blur it quite a bit more. And all of a sudden, we have this really nice subtle shadow. Shadow off, shadow on, right? If we press the play button, it works. So let's go ahead and experiment. We can also add in some color, but because there is a range of colors behind there, then it might be a bit difficult to add in some color. So I'll just keep it as is. I think it works. Will there be any other broadcasting later? Yeah, so right after me, I believe Kyle T. Webster is coming up with the Illustration Masterclass, and then I'll be back right after that with the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. All right, so someone's asking, you want to import videos and GIFs. So videos and GIFs are not supported at the moment, something the team is looking into, but I don't have much information other than that to provide at the moment. All right, so we have this container looking pretty good. Now over to the left, we may want to, scroll down a little bit and you'll see the schedule, indeed. We may want to add a menu, which with a few different options, maybe also the logo of this particular service, right? So let's go ahead and move this over a little bit. I am going to duplicate this shape, Command and Control D, just to make my life a little bit easier. And then I can make sure to drag it on back in the layers panel. I'm also going to make sure to name this container and menu. And I might want this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to bring this down a touch, bring it on out, just like that. We don't need it necessarily going the entire width of this. And I'm going to turn off the shadow for now. All right, now on the inside of this, I am thinking because you know me, many of you do know me, I love background blurs. And this is an opportunity to bring in a very subtle background blur. So at the bottom right-hand corner, that's the direction. I think every single stream I mess up the directions. I don't know how that happens. I have a 50-50 chance. Background blur. Now, this probably not going to work, especially if you're going to be adding content on top of it. So I'm going to drop the brightness of this to 0. And then what I want to do is I'm going to increase the effect opacity, which is this slider right here. And essentially what that's doing is it's taking the fill color. Let's go ahead and set that to white, and it's bringing some of that back in. So if I go to, let's say 30%, it's going to take 30% of that fill color and bring it back in. Right? So we're left with a very subtle background blur. And I can drop the border, make it nice and subtle. And there we go. Of course, you can experiment depending on the image in the background. You may want more of a blur, less of a blur. But honestly, 30, you're not going to see much of a difference because we have a gradient in the background. So I think that could work right about there. All right. Now, at the top of this, we may want to add in the logo for this particular service so users know what they're looking at. I do have that inside of my components. I'm going to drag that in here and pop it into place. I can make it a little bit larger if I need to. There we go. And I will remind all of you, even though I'm designing a cryptocurrency application for a specific coin, don't take investment advice from me. Do your own research. I do hold some of this coin, but I'm not doing this officially, just doing it as a fun side project. All right, so we have this looking pretty good. And now we might want some links going down. You know, home, an area to shop, staking, rewards, that sort of thing. So we are going to start with the active section, which is our home. Aaron says, not sure how easy it would be to implement in development. Clarify what you're talking about. Are you talking about the background blur? Because background blurs are supported by things like iOS, for example. So, not iOS, Mac OS. So background blurs are very easy to implement in development. And everything else that I've done, I think is pretty simple as well. So let me know in the chat what you're talking about. So we might want the active section right here, which is going to be home to start. So I'm going to grab the rectangle. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and snug to the left-hand side, but not too snug. We want to add a little bit of padding, and we'll go for something like this. And I'm going to round out the corners just a little bit. We want very subtle corners, right? Around 8 pixels. And I might want to bring in this red color, which if I do have in my assets, I do have it slightly different, but that's fine. And we don't need a border. And I want to make sure that this is behind the main container, right? Oh, Aaron's talking about just for website development. So there are blurs in website development, but this one in particular is focused on the desktop. So yeah, some things are definitely different between websites and desktop experiences depending on the OS, the platform you use. You mentioned Webflow, so they may have some restrictions or limitations. HTML and CSS has some restrictions and limitations as well, so definitely depends. But desktop, you should be okay with things like background blurs. And I believe CSS, to an extent, supports blurs as well. All right, I'm gonna make sure that I'm grouping some of these elements. Menu, and I'm gonna drag in my logo, view, bloop, there we go. And by the way, I will mention that at the top left-hand corner of this particular component, there is a hollow diamond, which typically indicates an instance, and there's a dot in the middle. And that indicates that this instance has been overridden. So I may have changed the color, or I may have moved some of the letters around, whatever it might be. I've overridden something, but it still remains linked back to the main component. All right, so we have this, although I'm kind of liking this orange. It's a little bit different. You see it? It's a little bit different. So I'm gonna hop into my assets, right click, press edit, and I'm simply going to sample this color here just to push that change to this container. All right. Now on the inside, we might want home text and also an icon as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and, so Islam is saying, I hope he answers the question. I missed your question. Oh, I will design what should I do design for? Okay, so you're asking basically what should you design first? Mobile, iPad, laptop, desktop, whatever it might be. Honestly, I think it completely depends. It depends on what your experience is focused on. If your experience is going to be targeted at mobile users, design that first. If it's going to be specifically for desktop users, design that first. For example, when I was designing Let's XD, I knew that most people would be looking at it on the desktop because they're using Adobe XD on the desktop, right? So I designed it specifically for a website, on a desktop, and then I tweaked for mobile. And the experience might be completely different. So these days, that would be my answer. Like, it depends, right? It really depends. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hop over to good old Nucleo, and I want a home icon. There are a lot of home icons, right? I've got some from Font Awesome, which are pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. And this one looks interesting. I also have some symbol icons, some stroked icons. I do love this one. I use this one all the time, right? So I'm gonna copy this one, pop it in here. There we go. And then over to the right, I'm gonna type out home. Now, styling wise, we're gonna go make sure it's left aligned. And I'm going to switch the fill over to a white. And I'm thinking we're gonna, Museo is an interesting typeface. I don't hate it, but maybe not for this project. I'm gonna go for Josephine Sands, which is also has some interesting properties to it, right? And maybe I'll bump this up just a little bit to 16 possibly. We're gonna see what that looks like. And as I always stress in everything that I do live, right? I know for me, I design a lot of my experiences very much zoomed in. Hey, Robert, great to see you. So I'm always designing zoomed in. I like things pixel perfect sometimes, but I lose track of what things actually look like when you're viewing them in proper resolution, right? So just go ahead and hit that play button at the top so you can see what it looks like. And that's looking okay. I might make some tweaks. I think the home icon is too large compared to the actual text. So I'm gonna bring this down and let's try maybe 16. Make sure it's centered. I think that's looking a little bit better. I can always go through and tweak some of these things a little bit later, but it's looking, maybe I'll bump this up just a tiny bit. I think that will do. That'll do, Pig, right? Mark says, I like the line, the wavy line in the home icon. I do too, and the reason I was laughing is Miroslav saying, no pop-ins for real, Howard? I know, right? Is there a Windows version of Nucleo? I am not sure, actually. That's a very good question, but definitely check out their website. All right, so we've got that looking pretty good. Now down below, we may want some additional icons and some additional links. So the first one, possibly a shopping experience, right? This icon here looks pretty nice. And these will be, did it paste? No, I did. Oop, there we go. And these will be the non-active links, but we still want them to be a little bit visible, right? So I'm going to drop this to 16 as well. And to help me out, I am going to drag out some guides so it snaps into place. Very good. Now, since this will be non-active, we may want to drop the color a little bit, right? So let's try, and we're going with a little bit of hint of blue in many things. So let's try like a grayish blue. You got to be careful because you don't want to go too dark. You don't want to go too light. Something like this could potentially work. We're going to see how things are looking once we add in additional links, but I'm kind of digging that color. It's not the greatest color, but I think it could work. And what I'm going to do is over to the right now, I am going to add some more text. And this might be shop. I'm going to sample this color, which I'm also going to add into my colors section of my assets. I'm also going to add the character style as well, just so I can change all the links at once if I need to. Now, a big question you have to ask yourself is, do you want the inactive links to be a different size than the active links? In some cases, that would probably be the preference, but I think in this case, we have enough room that we're not really restricted, so we're probably going to keep it as is. I'm going to move this over a little bit. 16 pixels looks pretty good, and that could potentially work. It looks like I'm going to move this down a touch. All right, could work, right? All right, so is that the Huawei App Store logo? I don't know. I have not seen it, but it's an interesting logo, right? It looks like a shopping bag, but maybe it also looks like the Huawei logo. I'm not sure. All right, so we have this looking pretty good. Now, to keep things organized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these two elements. Whoops, that's the H button to hide. I'm going to group these two elements. I'm going to call this shop. And I want to also put this into a group as well. So Command and Control G one more time. I'm going to call this links. And over within the properties inspector, I'm going to turn on a stack. Now, by default in this case, because there is only one group inside of this stack, it defined it as a horizontal stack. If there were multiple objects going in either direction, XD would recognize that and it would define it properly. But it doesn't have anything to work with. It only has one layer, so it just guesses at this point, or just defaults to horizontal. So I switch it over to vertical, and this will allow me to dive in here and duplicate. It's going to add a new link down below, and I can go ahead and stretch this on out. Let's try 32 pixels. No, let's try 40. 40 could potentially work. We'll see. And this one is going to be staking. And let's see if we can find, still working with that difficult keyboard. I am. There are no letters on the keyboard, and it's a different size than my previous one, so I just put myself in the worst possible situation. Is there a stake? There is a stake. Now, staking in cryptocurrency has nothing to do with an actual stake, but I found it funny, so we're going to run with it, right? Let's grab, which stake looks nice? Do you like this one or this one? These are big decisions, people. These are very large decisions that you have to make as a designer. Which stake icon is going to work best for your experience? We have a hard job. Delete. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to change the name, staking, and duplicate it downwards. I'm going to automatically add that padding, which is amazing. Rewards. And for this icon, let's see. And by the way, if you don't have Nucleo or third-party icons, you can always go into your plugins panel at the bottom left-hand corner, and you can press the plus button at the top and install the Icons for Design plugin, which does give you access to open source icons. There's thousands of them probably, which is amazing, right? Let's see. Star, maybe star for rewards. There's a Death Star. I'm not sure that's going to work. Maybe the Shooting Star, that could possibly work. Although I'm very tempted to add that Death Star in there. But yeah, probably not going to work. Sample our color, and again, you can use your assets as well. How does it go down after duplicating? So I have, let me hop in here. So in this group here, the group that's containing all the other groups of these links, right? I have stacking turned on inside of the properties inspector, and the stack currently is set to 40. So the padding in between each item is set to 40 pixels. So when I duplicate, Command and Control D, which I'm going to do in just a moment, right now, like that. It's going to take a look at that padding, and it's going to automatically apply that padding in between the previous item and the new item that we just duplicated. All right, so this next one might be debit card. And then we need a new icon. What icons pack do you have? So I have the Font Awesome icons pack, which are awesome, right? Font Awesome 6 is currently in early access. And then I have symbol icons, stroked icons. One of these ones, I think stroked or stoked, I got from internally, I think. Symbol I purchased many years ago, and then Font Awesome as well. And then Feather Icon. Feather Icon is open source, so you can have access to that inside of your plugins panel. That's what Icons for Design. That's what I was talking about. Let's look for some debit cards or credit cards, something to that effect. That one looks interesting down there, has a few extra elements on there. Yeah, we'll go with this one for now. And you're probably noticing that as I'm pasting things in, stacking is also pushing elements away, which is wonderful, right? So if you're designing new things, or you want to make this longer, or maybe this icon has to get bigger for whatever reason, stacking is doing exactly what it should be doing, which is great. Get rid of that. Call this card. Now this icon, this is an interesting situation, right? This icon is much wider than it is tall. So if we take a look at this, it kind of stands out. So there are two ways you can deal with this, right? Also, the rewards icon looks a little bit smaller, so we can deal with that as well. But there are two ways you can deal with that. You can either bring this back in so that, the width is 16. So let's lock this. But then the height's going to be a little bit different, right? Which isn't the worst thing in the world. It still kind of works. I would rather all the widths be the same than the heights. Or you can design a completely different icon that kind of takes that into consideration. So for example, what we might want to do for this particular icon is maybe we'll make this smaller, and we'll duplicate this, and we'll have another icon behind it to kind of fill in that gap. And what I can do is I can drag out another guide over on this side, just so I have a bit of a reference. And this one is behind. I might want to create a little bit of a shape. I don't think I'm going to end up using this, but we'll see where this goes, right? No, I don't like that at all. I don't know what I'm doing. But you can do that. You can, create different types of icons. It's difficult with this credit card type thing because it's naturally longer, right? Or I can just make the credit card itself. If I can get the path, there we go. A little bit smaller. So it could be a square credit card. Maybe that could work too, right? Have some fun with it. All right, and then we might want down here, duplicate. This might be membership. Just like that. And maybe, it's an exclusive club, for example. So I'm going to dive in and change this to maybe badge. Let's see. I don't know. Well, we can possibly create our own, right? Or maybe like trophy. That could work. Maybe a little trophy, something like that. I was going to create my own, but I'm lazy. We're all lazy as designers, right? But I suppose what we could do, and Miroslav is saying, can't believe how much XD has developed since I've started learning it. Yeah, it's come a long way, and we have a lot of really cool stuff planned for this year. So stay tuned for that. But I was going to say we can create something like, maybe we can grab the polygon tool, and maybe we'll set the sides at, 8, and then we can adjust the star. Maybe we can round out the corners a little bit, create some sort of a badge looking thing, right? And then we can fill it in with this. And then maybe on the inside, we might want a check mark. So I'm going to activate my grid, Command Control apostrophe, and then click, click, and click. Sample our background color, with the border. Make this smaller. increase the size a little bit, round out the corners, round out the joints. Might be a bit too big. Yeah, a little bit too big. Let's try 1.5. Right? So you can do something like that. Goodbye, trophy. I made my own icon. Badge, and then members. Let's move this on over to the left to snap on the guide, or at least close enough, right? All right, let's take a look. That could work. Fancy. All right. Might be able to look up patent for that icon, possibly, yeah. All right, hope one day guides will work in the same way as Illustrator and Photoshop. So are you referring to rulers possibly? adobext.uservoice.com, definitely go there and upvote these sorts of things so that the team knows that that's the preference that you might want. Now, I may want, in this case, to make a few changes. One, we have a lot of space down here we can fill up. Two, the icons or the text layers here are looking a little bit too bold. I might want home bold, but I may not necessarily want all of these bold. Now, instead of going through in each and every one and making those changes, I did save that character style to my assets, so I can right click, press edit. Let's try semi-bold. I think that could work. It's a little bit less bold. We probably don't want to go, let's say regular, and definitely don't want to go light. I'm going to just drag this. I'm holding down my shift key and adjusting. All right, that could work. 53 is not probably optimal, but we're going to run with it. If we do we had before we had 40, so it'd be 48 possibly. 48. Maybe 56. Is that the next one? I don't know. That could work. We're going to run with it. And then finally, at the very bottom, and this we could do separately, or we can put it in here and then adjust the spacing manually. Maybe we can do that. Is we might want settings. Well, there we go. And one more icon we're going to need is settings or filters. Filters, maybe. Nope. Or what was another one? Filter, maybe? There was one that I found not too long ago that was something like this. Or you know what? We can create our own again, right? So let's dive in here. We're going to create a little square. We'll round out the corners just a tiny little bit to give it a little bit of style. And it's a little bit too large, I think. And on the inside, we might want some sort of, filter type thing going on. Oops, drag this out. Don't need that. And we might want, let's say, a line right in the middle. We'll sample our background color, round out those corners, and then we might want on top of it some sort of a circle. And the border might be our background color as well. And the fill might be our blue. Interesting. I don't know. What do you all think? Of course, I have to duplicate this over and to add another one, and then maybe move this one down. Possibly there's a little bit of an alignment issue. I have to make this a little bit smaller. And then, yeah, that could work maybe, right? Bring this up a touch. There we go. With the free version of XD, can I create website with buttons? So XD doesn't export HTML, like full HTML. There are some plugins that can do that. It does provide some CSS and SVGs and things like that, but you won't be able to develop a website using Adobe XD, but you can definitely design one. And you're asking for free? Absolutely. You can dive in there and design a website for free. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, I don't want this one right with all these other links. I want that kind of by itself. And some people are suggesting a gear. Yeah, I can definitely do a gear, but I want to do something a little bit different, which is why I created that icon. So I'm going to dive in here and just adjust the padding of this one and just move it on down. All right, and just like that, we have our navigation bar all set up, right? Wonderful. looks pretty good. What do y'all think? Let me know. All right, so that's looking pretty fancy. And now we can start the process of building out the various elements that will go on this dashboard. And I'm thinking we're gonna have, on the right-hand side, there is going to be a pretty large area that shows maybe what your wallet looks like, for example. And then there'll be some more dashboardy type icons or elements like search and some cards that show maybe the current price or your wallet balance or, places to shop and that sort of thing. This might be a little bit too large. So let's actually start on this right-hand side here. I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool, or what I can do is simply duplicate this shape, Command and Control D, bring this back in, move it over a little bit. Let's try 24 pixels from the left and bring this on down. There we go. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down my Command key on the keyboard and using my arrow keys to resize. You can also add Shift to resize by 10 as well, or you can do it within the Properties Inspector as well. Is there any way to have the layout grid and square grid turned on at the same time? I don't believe so. I think it's a one or the other thing at the moment. But let me just double check. Go to Layout and then Command and Control Apostrophe. Yeah, it's one or the other at the moment. But that would be a good suggestion for user voice as well. All right, now because I duplicated this shape, it has that shadow on it. Probably don't need that, may not need the border as well. And I might just want to go for white in this case. And what we're noticing now is if many of the containers are going to be white, is the background behind it is a little bit too light. So we might just want to experiment with some of these colors a little bit. I do have a color over here that I might want to use, and that could work. It's a little bit of blue, but also there's a little bit of contrast between the white and the blue. Is there any discussion going on regarding the ability to change the color of the pasteboard? Not that I know of, but I know there's discussions on lots of different things, probably a lot that I don't even know about. So it's possible, but not that I know of. But that'd be nice. Okay, another thing that you might want to pay attention to is when I duplicated this container in the background and resized it a little bit, the corner radius remained the same, as it should, right? But if you take a look, especially visually, it looks off, right? So the 32 pixels here and the 32 pixels here, it doesn't really, something looks off, right? And it's the same distance, 24 and 24. So you just want to bring this back a little bit, just a tiny little bit. I'm going to bring it to 24. That way, visually it matches. Are there any plugins where I can make buttons? Well, I mean, buttons are, it depends on the type of button. Many buttons you can create very easily with components, and you can have hover states and things like that. But it depends on the type of buttons, but I'm sure there are plugins that can help you do things like that. All right, so we have this container here, and this might be a look into our wallet, for example. And, if you connect a third-party wallet, maybe you can switch between various other wallets or your various accounts. So maybe we'll start at the top and we'll have an avatar. So I'm going to draw out my avatar right about here. I'm going to round out the corners. I'm going to round them out a little bit more than I typically would, just to give it a little bit of style. Someone's asking about why XD does not have dark mode. It wouldn't be a stream without a dark mode question. The short answer is that, one, it's not a priority. There are much bigger things that the XD team has to tackle before investing in dark mode. And it is an investment, and that's number two. We have to work with various other teams at Adobe, including our design system team. So there's an investment there. And then three, there is a third one. It'll come to me. But yeah, it's a lot more. It's a lot more complicated than it looks, because we're working on two different OSs, right? Both of these OSs, Mac OS and Windows, have certain restrictions and guidelines on dark mode and things like that, and theming. So we have to fit that in as well. So there's a lot that goes on. It's not just like darkening some elements and there you have dark mode. There's a lot. So the time will come, but not at the moment. All right, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to turn off the border. I do want to fill it with a lovely avatar. So over in my libraries, I do have the amazing toy faces, and maybe Cody will put a link in the chat for toy faces. And I do have, there's a Howard toy face. I did pay the offer offer. I did pay the author and the artist to create a Howard toy face. Look at that. I don't have my glasses today, but yeah, it's me. But you can put anybody in there that you want. And over to the right, I might want to put something like main account. And this is just going to let you know very quickly which account it is that you're on. And maybe to really stress which one it is, I might want to drop this to maybe regular. Maybe even light. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. I think that could work. The Howard face. Yes. Is there a way to make a button on XD just redirect to a YouTube video? There is not. So you can't link externally at the moment. Something the team is looking into, but there are, of course, security concerns around things like that. So maybe one day. Maybe one day. We'll see. All right, so we have that, and maybe to let users know they can switch between the various accounts that they might have connected, there might be a small chevron going downwards. So with the pen tool, I'm going to very easily create one. Just like that. Round out all the things, and maybe we'll just use the same color, right? That arrow might be a little bit too large. Oh, it's not too bad, actually. Make it a tiny bit smaller. That could work. And what I might want to do is make sure that it's over to the left, so we just have about the same amount of spacing. Maybe I'll move this inwards a little bit as well. Let's go for 32 pixels. Let's try 16. 32. There we go. That arrow over there looks a little bit strange, kind of floating up there. So what I might want to do is just kind of move this back and just make this a little bit skinnier, right? And what I can also do is pop all of this into a group, Command and Control G. I'll call this wallet, if I can spell properly. And I'll also group these elements here. And if I turn on padding, 32, 32, 32, and I can also do 32 here, which is going to squish that bottom in because there was nothing down there. So it defined that padding as like 600 and something, right? But what's cool about this is when I do get to the point where I want to add new elements, let's say I want to add some sort of a pie chart right here, right? It's going to automatically expand, which is wonderful, right? So we can start adding in our chart. And this might be, for example, maybe a breakdown of the different coins that might be in your wallet. I'm just adding this blue background for now. It's probably not going to stay. Any idea why the text is always upwards in the container? Any idea why that? I'm not sure what that means. Let me know what you mean by that. All right. So what we want in here is maybe a few different kind of line charts, dashes going around this particular circle, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate, and this one, we don't want a fill on these, but we do want a border. So maybe the first one might be, maybe we'll just go like a nice bright pink, right? I'm going to bump up the size quite a bit. And what I want to do now is basically have just a portion of this filled in. So I'm going to set the gap in the properties inspector to about 1000, and then increase the dash until I'm pretty happy with where it's sitting. And then I'm going to round out those corners, and maybe I'll just bring this in a little bit, right? And now I can duplicate this, and we'll change this to maybe a blue. And we'll bring back the dash, and we can rotate this. Phew. Maybe, let's see, 90? Nope. So I want to make sure that the padding is not affected by this adjustment. There we go. Something like that, possibly. There we go. And then we can duplicate one more and bring this on back as well. Let me turn the padding off just for a moment, because the rotation is affecting the padding, which I definitely don't want. You know what, maybe we'll just leave it as 1 for now. We will deal with that in a moment. And then on the inside, we may want, a call out of exactly, how much of whatever coin it is that we're holding, right? So I'm going to drag another circle out here. Just like that. And this one might be white. We're going to get to the styling in just a moment or two. And on the inside, maybe we'll do like 3.2 for Ethereum. Make this nice and bold. A bit smaller. And then down below, we might want to also show what the equivalent is of in US dollars. I'm not sure exactly what it is right now, but it's probably somewhere around, what was it, like 1,200 last time I checked? 1,300? I don't know math. Math is hard. Well, whatever. I'll just do that. And this one I'm going to drop in weight a little bit, maybe even drop in size a touch, so it lines up. There we go. Drop that in opacity a touch. All right, now obviously this chart isn't looking that exciting, but we can start adding some style to this, right? So we can possibly maybe bring this in a little bit thicker. Actually, what we can also do is we can duplicate this, increase this, change this color to blue. That's one way we can do it, and then move it behind. A little bit strange with the colors there, but that's fine. Let's change this to a green and move it on back. That could work. The colors are not great. I'm certainly not loving the colors at the moment, but we're going to run with it, right? I believe Aaron is referring to the vertical alignment of the text box. Yeah, there are a lot of text improvements that the team wants to get to. They're working on a lot of things in that area. I'm not sure on timing though, but yeah, lots in the works, and hopefully we'll see some sooner rather than later. All right. Now maybe I just want to add a little bit of depth to this, right? So I'm going to duplicate this particular shape, or I can just use this one possibly. But what I want to do is I'm going to set a fill, linear gradient, and the top color is going to be almost white. And then I'm going to blur this quite a bit. And then experiment with the colors again, right? Just so we have a little bit of depth going on in there. Drag this down a touch. Interesting, right? Interesting. Maybe I'll duplicate this. Drag, whoops. Add a bit of a border, possibly. Drop it in size a touch so we have a little bit of a lip down there, right? I could even blur it just a little bit, maybe like 1 possibly. Ooh, look at that. All of a sudden we have a little bit of depth going, almost neumorphism, right? Almost. I should probably name some of these layers because they're all over the place. Which one did I just, this one, right? Yeah. All right, it's interesting. I'm not sure I'm loving it, but we could run with it. We can also add a little bit of a shadow here. Maybe add some color to this. Possibly. Maybe I'll drop the color just a little bit of this particular shape. Just a tiny little bit, only so that I can add a bit of a border again. Just getting some styling in here, right? Just gives an interesting feel. And if you're familiar with the cryptocurrency world, there's definitely, some interesting colors and design choices going on, so we're going to run with it. We're going to have some fun with this. I would probably continue to build on this just to make sure that it looks a little bit more like it has some depth, but I do want to move on to some other additional things down here before we wrap things up. So right down here, we may want maybe 2 buttons to send and receive some funds. I'm actually going to go ahead and grab all these, group them. Am I pressing the wrong button on my keyboard? I probably am. And I'll call this chart. And then right down here, we're going to have 1 button going across. I'm going to bring it back just a little bit. And this, I'm going to round it out just a little bit. Let's try 8 pixels. And on the inside, we might want a little bit, let's try this color in the background. And then the border, I'm going to drop this a touch. Nice and subtle, right? And then send. Let's try 18. 18 might be too large. Let's go back down to 16. And then we definitely want an icon over to the left, just to fill out that space a little bit. Something like this, possibly. It's probably not the best choice in icon, but I think it could work for now. Let's use our color right here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller to match the text. Let's try 16. Make sure this is centered. Almost. I think the icon might be a little bit too large still. Possibly, maybe. I think the border might be a little bit too strong. All right, we're going to leave it at that for now. We can always make tweaks later, but I do want to group these elements, Command and Control G. My G key is not working. Interesting. Oh, I was pressing the wrong key. Smart Howard. I'm also going to pop this into a larger group and call this buttons, and then turn a stack on. That way I can very easily duplicate this, and this will be receive. And maybe I'll just grab this little guy here and flip it on upside down, right? Perfect. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then maybe 1 more button down below. And this is going to be to maybe purchase. Now this one we probably want to stand out a little bit more, so I'm actually going to choose a nice blue color. I love the color of this particular, blue. Purchase, and since we do have icons for the other ones, let's type out maybe coins, possibly. Coin. This one from Awesome looks pretty interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and pop that in there. Now when I do paste it, this is a very large icon. So it's gonna push everything away, but I can just resize it down. Let's try 16. Oh, let me turn off responsive resize. Change this to white. I'm going to make this a little bit bolder than the other ones, only because, maybe this is the main call to action or something, right? Purchase coins. And make sure this is centered. There we go. I admire your patience for your keyboard. I'm determined to make this keyboard work. I am determined. All right, I'm going to group these 2 elements, call these buttons, and then turn a stack on, just so that I can very easily rearrange these if I need to. Maybe, I'm told that purchase coins should be above. What did I do? I completely missed some of the elements. This, and this. Whatever, I can't spell. We're gonna run with it. Buttons, turn on stack. Again, just, in case we want to swap these around, we can easily do that. We can swap these around as well. And then finally, right down below, before we wrap up, there might be maybe a text field that shows your wallet address. And maybe we'll grab the style here to pop here. And inside of here, there will be the wallet address, and then maybe over to the right, there might be some buttons to maybe copy a QR code, for example. Drag this over, make it a square button, another square button, bring this on back, and that's where we're going to leave it for today. Next week, we definitely have a lot more that we have to cover. I am bothered by the spacing here. There we go. We'll make it even for now. But next week, we have a lot more that we're going to cover, but a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in to today's masterclass. Stick around. We have Kyle T. Webster coming up in just a few minutes with an illustration masterclass. I'll be back in a little bit with the XD Daily Creative Challenge, and I will see you all next time.